Welcome. We are continuing the meeting of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. And just a note, Vice Cheryl Harrison pointed out earlier that today is World Youth Skills Day, which is happening remotely around the world today. So that's pretty interesting.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, point of clarification. Could you please note that I'm now on the meeting because I wasn't part of the roll call earlier?
Okay, I was actually, I'll take roll call right now just to make sure the public knows who is in the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to just answer when I call your name. So, Trustee Amos.
Hello, everyone.
Trustee Collard.
Here.
Trustee Daniele.
Here.
Vice Cheryl Harrison.
Hello, I'm here.
Trustee Garretts.
Good afternoon.
Trustee Gray. Oh, she's waving. Trustee Reynolds.
Hi, everyone.
Trustee Rocha.
Good afternoon.
And Trustee Shuttleworth.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And Director, sorry?
Trustee Oliver is here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you. Director Miller, could you please point out who is joining us this afternoon?
All superintendents are here except Associate Director Bogue, along with General Manager Taha and General Manager, Human Rights and Equity Advisor, Jewel Amoa, Dr. Jewel Amoa. And we have some guests, but I'm going to leave that to Superintendent Padre to introduce them as they come forward.
Okay, thank you. So next we are up to ratification action items. And just so the public knows that since this is a special board meeting, the agenda things can't be added or removed from the agenda. Well, they can be removed if they are no longer relevant, but cannot be added to an agenda. So there isn't a vote on it this afternoon. So we are up to approval of business transacted in private session. Vice Cheryl Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Hello, yes, in fact we do. And that is, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approved the resolution from private session, July 15th, 2020, respecting property matters, report 20072, and I so move. Thanks.
Excellent. Trustee Daniele, would you like to second this motion?
Yes, thank you, I would.
Great. Is there any discussion at all? Seeing none, so we're going to call the question. All those in favor? And Trustee Garretts, do I need to ask you vocally? Or are you, I see Trustee Gray's, oh, everybody, excellent. That carries unanimously. Everybody's voting is now working. Wonderful. Okay. So I'd like to draw your attention to report 20073 from Vice Chair Al Harrison. Vice Chair Al Harrison, I assume you'd like to move this?
Yes, please.
Excellent. Trustee Oliver, would you like to second it?
I'd like to second it. Thank you.
Okay, so I will read the motion. Be it resolved that the chair of the board write the Minister of Education, copying all boards and OPSPA on behalf of all Halton District School Board trustees, requesting that a limited term, defined scope, multi-stakeholder task force be struck to be critically reflective and develop big picture, innovative opportunities about how the publicly funded school system in Ontario can build back better in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Be it further resolved that should the minister not be able to pursue this, that the trustees of the Halton District School Board will seek partners and coordinate a forum to develop these opportunities by the end of 2020. Vice Cheryl Harrison, would you like to speak to this before I open this up to debate?
Hello. Sure, absolutely. So this notion of building back better is one that has been, I've heard many times from leaders as they talk about, the future after COVID-19 and really being able to leverage the opportunity to have a long, hard look at the systems that we have in place and how those systems can be improved on and really be what we aspire them to be, the collective we. So I haven't yet seen kind of that long-term piece. It's been a lot of reactionary stuff for now with the command tables and the different tables and so on. And I read a piece by Annie Kidder, People for Education recently, that was talking about basically this idea, and they have hosted one session, Bounce Forward, I believe it was called. And I just think that it would be great to get this macro discussion going, and hopefully, the ministry in their position as policy setters and direction givers are really in the best place to do this. But I know it's a tricky time for everybody, and I wouldn't want that opportunity to be lost. So that is the genesis and thinking behind that motion.
Okay, just a note, I do realize that for some reason, my brain skipped some things. So we will deal with this issue now and then go back to the presentation. So are there any questions or debate to this motion? No, I'm seeing a whole bunch of shaking heads and no one's going on the speakers list. Personally, I think that it is a great way to move forward and to take advantage of, different thinking that is happening, that could happen at this time. So I am personally in favor of this. So I am going to call the question. So all those in favor, of course, my screen just froze. There we go. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you.
Now that my brain. Okay, so we have a presentation from the Halton Regional Police. And I understand Superintendent Padraig Barrick will be introducing our guests.
Through you, Chair, that's correct.
Yes, thank you, Chair Grabentz. Through the chair, two trustees, I'm pleased to welcome staff from the Halton Region Police Services today. We have Constable Adam Searing, Constable Rob DeViller, Inspector Susan Biggs, and Deputy Chief Roger Wilkie. They are here just to describe our long-standing relationship with the board and are going to make a short presentation to that effect. We'll leave time for trustee questions at the end, and you will note Jonathan Shaw, our Assistant Principal of Safe Schools, is here to chime in, as well as myself, should you have any questions directed at us. And so I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Wilkie, who will start.
Well, thank you, Scott, and through the chair, greetings, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. I know you have a busy schedule, so that's nice to be able to connect during this time. The Halton Regional Police Service is certainly a proud partner of the Halton District School Board. The pandemic has triggered many concerns for all sectors about what life will look like moving forward. And for education, I can imagine this is your discussions on what the school year is going to look like in the fall. Recent global and local events related to systemic racism and the service to racialized communities in all sectors, including ours in policing, has triggered a variety of responses and some unrest. And unfortunately, what we've seen across the province is that some school boards have cut ties with police school liaison programs without the necessary dialogue and thought. And in my view, that's quite unfortunate. So we want to take some opportunity today to kind of connect with you, to give you an overview of what we do, how we do, and why we do, so that you can make some informed decisions moving forward. Despite the uncertainty of what our collective future does look like, I want you to know with certainty that the Halton Police is committed to our partnership with the Halton District School Board. Our sole purpose in meeting with you today is to express our sincere desire to continue with our liaison model and encourage ongoing dialogue and analysis of our partnership to ensure that we are meeting the needs of students, families, teachers, management, and then you as the board. We're confident that the Halton model is different than others. We're not mall cops. We don't sit there and focus strictly on enforcement. It's been designed in collaboration with stakeholders and school boards. In my view, it's well thought out and centered on positive interactions and rooted in the principles of the Halton Region's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, which I've had the pleasure of working on and developing for our region. Our local success and positive impact is the direct result of our commitment to put the right people into these critical roles. I don't know if you know this, but we have 17 officers assigned strictly to the school liaison role. We have 8 elementary school liaison officers, and each of them cover approximately 23 schools each across the region. We also have 9 high school liaison officers, and they're responsible for approximately 3 to 4 schools each. And this group of energetic and committed officers have the best interests of the students in mind. I'm very proud of the many programs which you're going to hear about today, and the extracurricular activities that these members lead to enhance inclusive youth engagement and positive interactions with police. Please know that our focus has never been about enforcement, but rather an investment in all children and youth through positive relationships and a collaborative pursuit of identifying mechanisms for what we call upstream service delivery that ultimately prevents crisis before it becomes crisis and enhances safety and well-being for all students and their families. Here with me today is Inspector Susan Biggs, who's the commander of our Regional Community Mobilization Bureau. And Sue oversees our respective school liaison programs, in addition to our services response to mental health, diversity and inclusion, vulnerable person services, community outreach, and a whole host of other programs. We also have Constables Adam Sering and Rob Delviller, who represent our liaison programs, and they're going to speak to you today about some of the great work that they're doing. Together, we aim to provide a brief overview of our programming and service delivery, and we trust that this will demonstrate our commitment to the needs of the school boards and that of our children, youth, and families that we are both inherently mandated to serve. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sue Biggs. Thank you.
Constable Biggs, are you there?
Sorry about that, a little bit of a technical problem. Good afternoon, it's a pleasure to be here. As the Deputy said, we really do have a long history of police officers in Halton schools. Our officers are carefully selected on a competence-based criteria. As you probably already know as well, we have a robust and current police school protocol in place, which is examined and updated every year with the school boards. Our policy sets out how we both react to situations, how police are involved in events at the schools, and what information can be shared with schools under different legislations. As well, we also have an inclusive violent threat risk assessment protocol, which is co-owned by the school boards and the police, which is also inclusive of other community agencies. Together, the school boards and the police hold training sessions to include community partners in VITRA sessions at least once a year. Our elementary school program has over a 20-year history of involvement, first of all with the DARE program, then with the Bravo program, and now currently we have the Community Partners for Healthy Living program. This is in partnership with the school boards and with public health. The elementary school officer role has morphed really from being perceived as a presenter and perceived as being an enforcement figure to an allyship and a liaison role. This is a result of our excellent partnership with the school boards, because together we identified what the role of the police should be within elementary schools. And that was identified not just from the teachers, but also hearing back from some of the students as well. Our ESLOs within the primary schools are coaching and mentoring children and youth and connecting positively with those that are perhaps a little bit more vulnerable or who may not otherwise have an opportunity to connect with a police officer. As well, our high school officer role has also changed over the past 20 years from a principal and VP liaison role to a true community collaborative mentorship role within the schools. Officers are responsible to respond to incidents, of course, within the schools, but really their true value lies in risk mitigation, prevention, and social development. This takes the form of connection with youth, parents, and teachers, as well as the community connections the officer has available to them. As the deputy said, all of our school officers work very closely within their overarching team in the Regional Community Mobilization Bureau. Within this team, our officers have access to mental health response teams, which are other police officers, social workers, and mental health nurses, our youth social workers, community outreach officers, our equity, diversity, and inclusion office, and our elder service coordinator officer, as well as our community safety and wellbeing officers. This is really important because often a situation within a school is not an individual youth situation and can benefit from a holistic approach, either by us as police or by community resources as a whole, depending on what the issue is. And now I'd like to pass you over to Constable Adam Sering, who's a high school liaison officer, to talk a little bit about some of the work that he's currently doing within the high schools.
Good afternoon to everyone present on this call. As Inspector Biggs said, my name is Adam Sering. I've been a high school liaison officer for 4 years with the Halton Regional Police, and I'm currently stationed out of Burlington. Adding to what Deputy Wilkie and Inspector Biggs mentioned, I'm going to speak about a couple initiatives that we have started here in Burlington. For the past 4 years, I have been fortunate enough to be a coach with one of the local high schools, coaching the girls' high school hockey team. The past 3 years, we've been able to make it to OFSA, and as a result of this, has allowed me to build relationships not only with the students, but with the staff and with parents of these students, and friendships I probably would never have had without the opportunity to coach within the high school. To add to that, I have been helping with Joseph Brant, partnering with Joseph Brant Memorial Hospital and both Halton School Board and Halton Catholic School Board in an initiative called Paint the Town. Initiative that now helps raise money for the Joseph Brant Memorial Hospital mental health ward. This initiative has raised over $2,500 since 2018. And what the initiative is students are doing paintings for things that come to them in Burlington. And then the students' artwork is auctioned off every May, June, with all those funds then going to the hospital and giving the students exposure on work done. Further that, another program that we have initiated is Police Academics. And what this program is a slew of presentations to grade 9 students coming into high school. And it surrounds drugs, cybercrime, healthy relationships, and describes what we do as police inside the school. Accompanied by this is the presentation, its condensed version that we present to parents at the request of parent council during parent-teacher night, so the parents know what to expect and what also our role is within the schools, and gives a Q&A opportunity at the start of the high school year for parents with police. And lastly, I partnered with the City of Burlington in assisting with the rollout of their People and Places in Halton program, which is a new school curriculum, and working with the students. And I present on STEP-TED. What STEP-TED is it's a crime prevention through environmental design that we do, and assist students in completing their final project for the course, and which is writing a report on a local sustainable initiative that could be implemented to help kind of make Burlington a thriving and vibrant city. So those are a few examples of programs in the last 4 years I've been part of, and has allowed me to kind of build relationships not only with the school, but with students. So at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Constable Rob DeViller, who is elementary school liaison officer with Halton Regional Police.
Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Constable Rob DeViller. I'm a elementary school officer in Milton. And just to piggyback off of what Adam said, Inspector Biggs and Deputy Wilkie, many of these initiatives that we've done, and by the way, I'm in my third year as elementary school officer. And just to give a bit of background, I was also a youth in the diversion program for 5 years and a former elementary school teacher with Dufferin Peel School Board. So with my background and the understanding of on both sides, the importance of having a police liaison officer in the school over the last 3 years, and since the elimination of the Bravo program, it has given us and afforded us the opportunity to build off many of these initiatives. And I'll just name off a few that I've had the opportunity working in the schools in Milton. This year, I've had the opportunity to help coach intermediate boys basketball team at one of my schools. And with that, attended after school events. With having the flexibility now to switch shifts into an afternoon format, I'm able to attend events such as basketball, set up tournaments and programs after school, community school barbecue events as well, which unfortunately we couldn't do in May and June due to the pandemic, but was in the planning stages. We also try to go in and teach or do presentations from kindergarten up to grade 8. Community helpers at JK and SK, we come in obviously in uniform and talk about our role in the schools and having that sort of that relationship and trust with the students as young as JK and up to grade 8. Certainly in the junior intermediate grades from 6 to 8, we've gone in and done presentations on the importance of proper social media use and the roles and responsibilities as students, and the consequences as well as if misusing social media and how that can lead to criminal charges later in life. In addition, I've sort of piggybacked off the Pizza with Police program that Mary Repta had started in Burlington, which I picked up in Milton. We got that going as well in the winter months. Breakfast programs as well. I've attended myself and my partner Krista in Milton, the before school breakfast programs at a couple of schools in Milton. In uniform, serving breakfasts. Parents love to see us there. It's a great way to build those relationships and trust with the school community. As well, I've attended many Christmas concerts, probably something I've never had the opportunity to do in the past due to just the scheduling with the Bravo classes. Attended several Christmas concerts during the month of December. And sort of alongside that, the Miracle on Main Street, which is, as everyone knows, is a big event. The rallies, I attended several schools to help support Tigerjeet and his presentations at those schools. And just in closing, just having that relationship with admin, staff, and students, and having those relationships and trust built in, they feel having that comfort level of having to call on us, even if it's just a quick question, is a valuable resource to have, and just that trust, that relationship that we've built, and certainly I have over the last 3 years. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you very much, Adam. I'm just going to throw it out there. If anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, if trustees have any questions, please add yourself to the speakers list. This sometimes takes a minute or two for people to show up. Okay, Trustee Amos, go right ahead.
Through you to our presenters, I'd just like to say thank you so very much for all that you have done in the schools. I just wanted to say, to let you know how big an impact that your presence in the schools is. From talking to students and from having my own children in the system, they are so much more comfortable by having been exposed to some of the programs that you've held within the schools, but just seeing them. Seeing the officers in the schools. Most of the officers seem to know so many of the kids by name when they're walking down the halls in the high schools and that kind of thing. And so that when the officer maybe rotates off being the officer in the schools and is actually out in the community, then they see them, they say hi, and they feel like, wow, I know that person. And so there is a very huge connection, and I think it's a comfort level, which is really important, and it makes you not the bad guys, if you know what I mean. I mean, I just think that it's that the respect and they make you become a person to them as not opposed to a job out there that they should be wary of. I'm not sure if I'm saying it the right words, but I just think it is making a huge impact on them. And you have been involved in other programs like Get Respect, Give Respect, Get Respect with the school boards. And I know that too was something that had a lot of children involved in making posters and songs and that kind of stuff. And that really helped raise the profile as well. So I just like to say thank you for all of that you've done in all the different levels through DARE, Bravo, and up to the community liaison officer in the high schools, plus with the other pieces of just being involved. You are making a huge impact in a very positive way for all of our students, so thank you.
Okay, I don't hear a question in there, so we'll move to the next speaker, and that is Trustee Garretts.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on what Trustee Amos was mentioning, you are absolutely making a huge impact in the schools. I got to see it firsthand as an employee and as a parent. It's phenomenal. I had the opportunity to see the interaction within the community at our events as well, and kids as a whole really respect the officers, and it goes both ways. And I've seen that firsthand. The respect level from the officers to the kids is a flow through as well. My question is, do you foresee any changes to sort of the way you're doing business with HDSB right now in the future? My hope is not, but what do you guys see?
Well, certainly thank you for the question. It's something that we ask every year, and it's important to do so. And you can see through the history of if we're settled on the past, then we'll never be current and relevant to the needs of our existing boards and the students and families. So with our recent move to CPHL, that was a big move away from Bravo, which was key because it wasn't hitting the mark. And so you have our commitment, and that's why we're here to you today to be proactive in that dialogue where we need your feedback. We need the feedback of students and families and at the educators, boards, so that we do hit the mark. And so because of our ongoing commitment to this area and truly investing in our future and children, we need to make sure that we have the right deliverables. And we are very confident that what we're going to deliver in the 2021 school session is spot on with today's needs.
Okay, Next is Trustee Shuttleworth, and Trustee Gray, I know that your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair Bentz. I don't know if this is to Inspector Biggs or if it's to Deputy Wilkie, but my question is, you talked about competency-based selection. What I was wondering is, can you expand on what those competencies are? Like, how is it you're selecting the officers to go into the schools?
Hi there. I think I can answer that question. Yes, and so yes, we do have a list of competencies that we look for in our officers. They are based upon community collaborations, community liaison. Obviously, their presentation style has to be good. Their communication styles have to be tip-top. And what we're looking for are people who are, like I said, good collaborators who are able to communicate with people on various different levels. And who also are prepared to, even whether they're parents or whether they're not parents, they are prepared to show mentorship within the schools as well. Because what we want is for our officers to build those relationships with the kids, build those relationships with the teachers and the parents, regardless of the reason why the officer is actually connecting with the young people. And what we are looking for as our officers to connect with those who are perhaps a little bit more vulnerable in the community. And so it's a very specific type of person that we're looking for. And we have actually had selection processes where if we don't get suitable candidates, then we will forego selecting somebody until we do get a suitable candidate. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Yep, and so I actually have sort of a follow-up question. With that, when you say you're going into the schools, and I know, so when you do presentations, you probably go in your full uniform. When you're in the schools, are you always in uniform? Or do you go in to sort of bring that human side to who you are behind the badge, right? So I'm just wondering if it's always sort of in that official capacity, or do you go in as well in, like, you say you're coaching, like I think, Adam, you said you coach hockey, maybe? And Rob, you coach volleyball. I don't know, but when you, like, I'm assuming that when you're there coaching, you aren't wearing your uniforms. So I'm just kind of wondering, when you're in the school, are you always there in your official police identity?
I'll jump in here. I'd say majority of the time, yes, we are in uniform, but there are times that we do go in regular street clothes, or what we refer to as plain clothes. So coaching would be one example where I am connecting with the girls, and in the school, just wearing spirit wear, their t-shirts, sweatshirts, or just my regular wear. There's also times in the high school that we're going into auto class, woodshop class, stuff like that, where we just show up in jeans and a t-shirt for that class to interact with the kids and participate in the class that way. Again, just to bring that we're normal humans outside the uniform, if that's kind of answers. And Rob's just going to add to that as well for the elementary.
Yeah, likewise, as Adam said, in coaching, I would come in before shift in the morning and in my civvies or in my gym wear, of course, getting approval from my sergeant, and very supportive of that. Again, it kind of breaks down that barrier, and they see, hey, Officer Rob is like one of us, and he's playing basketball, so, and coaching. So, and then we never had the opportunity this year, but in previous years, we did a youth versus police charity basketball game and ball hockey as well. Again, in our cities, and with many of the kids watching and supporting us, and seeing how kind of cool it is seeing a police officer out of uniform for a change. But yeah, as Adam said, the majority of the time we are in uniform and very identifiable. So
great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on our list, Vice Cheryl Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So thank you very much for all of the activities that are taking place, particularly the ones that develop real and deep relationships with kids that they can transfer into as they grow through the years. And also, these kids are all part of a network. So one positive interaction, I think, can really spread and grow. And conversely, I think one negative interaction with members of your team can have a similar sort of growth. So I know that you had asked for suggestions and feedback. And given the climate that we're in right now, I just wonder about developing a very specific mechanism to engage in dialogue with Black, Indigenous, people of color students and disenfranchised students, so that you can gain an understanding of how your officers are perceived in schools. Because I had the good fortune of sitting on the vaping committee that was led by students of the HDSB a couple of years ago, and you know, those very involved and engaged students have one perspective, and sometimes our disenfranchised students, who are wonderful people waiting to shine, have a very different perspective, and I think those are the ones that we need to reach in particular. And then my second question is whether there's any connection between your team and other police initiatives, such as Project Noisemaker, for example, which also has an educational component. And I know through some community chatter that a number of youth are being stopped through this program. And while the program boasts an educational component, I just wonder what that is. And again, because of this network, one initiative kind of links into others. So that's my question and my suggestion. Thank you.
Hi there, it's Sue again. Yes, I think I can definitely answer the first one. So we're talking about youth within our schools, and we're talking about perhaps we're not hearing all of the voices that we need to hear. And it's very true. You know, sometimes the most important perspective is the one you haven't heard yet. And we say this over and over again. And so what we're doing as a police service right now in this current climate is that we're reaching out to very many different groups and committees that already exist in Halton to try and hear those voices that we haven't heard yet. So many of those groups are Black groups from, we have a Black group in Burlington, the Burlington Caribbean Connection. We have another group in Halton, another group in Milton and Halton Hills. And from those groups, we're trying to develop a youth forum where we actually hear voices of Black youth within Halton region. Some people are more willing to come to the table than others. And so what we're trying to do is depend on our community partners that we have established already and some new community partners that we are developing very, very recently to try and bring youth to the table to hear their perspectives. And you're right, sometimes we feel like we're perceived a certain way and we're right, and sometimes we feel like we're perceived a certain way and we're incorrect. And so the only way to learn is to have dialogue with as many people as would be willing to come to the table. So yes, that's something that we're setting up very, very soon. In terms of your second question to do with Noisemaker, yes, I understand that there is an educational component to Noisemaker. It's not all about enforcement. It is about, educating people out on the street, whether they be youth or whether they be young adults, about the whole project. So I don't know if Adam and Rob have any more information about that.
Yeah, I can't comment on that. I don't know anything about the project beyond probably what you guys do. I'm not involved directly with that project. Sorry.
No worries. Could I just have a quick follow-up then? So I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. And one is that disenfranchised students come in all shapes and forms, and they're often not represented by a committee or an organization. And that's what perpetuates these cycles. So I think that if there's any opportunity to perhaps consider somehow tapping into that group, it would serve this initiative well. And the second point about Project Noisemaker is just to say, yes, so while those connections may not exist within the different different initiatives of the police, certainly the kids are talking about them across silos, and it does impact on what they think about the officers in the school. Thank you.
Perhaps if I can just comment through the chair. Thank you for your comments and feedback. You know, this is so important. Your second last point about having that connection with people that maybe don't have an ambassador, they're not part of a committee, or they don't feel connected or confident to go and to speak with police to relay their concerns or feedback. That is the sole purpose of why we need to partner the Halton District School Board and the police, because you are, as educators, they need to be our eyes and ears so that when our officers are in the school, they're able to identify potentially people who are vulnerable, who are marginalized or left out, and then we can bring them into the conversation to include their perspective on so many social issues, social disorder matters that we're trying to collaboratively address. So thank you for that, and we will continue to drive those types of mechanisms through our school liaison officers to build that trust. And I think having positive interactions over and over and over within the schools builds that trust and confidence. And we know how quickly that trust and confidence can go away after one or two small incidents. So we are constantly working at that, building those relationships, and we look forward to working with the teachers and faculty within each school to create those positive relationships with those that potentially don't feel that they have the conduit to directly to police to relay their concerns or feedback. As for Noisemaker, it's funny, my son just graduated from Nelson High School. He's off to university in the fall, and he had a small gathering at our house recently, and I had two noisemakers in my backyard who filled my ear quickly about their concerns, and it was interesting to hear their perspective. And as much as we push out matters of education about why this is a community concern, it was lost on them. So the ability just to engage with them for 20 minutes in my backyard was actually quite an interesting experience, and it relays the importance of, we may think we have it right, but the mechanisms aren't there to inform everybody. And so I'm aware of it's like a social media site. There's about 170 members, and there's a lot of banter amongst people with noisy cars, and they're concerned about aggressive enforcement or perceived harassment in that regard. I can tell you that the officers are trying to educate through enforcement. Not every interaction results in ticket. There's a lot of warnings. Some kids don't want to abide by that. I think we can do better, and I assure you that we will use our social media outlets, and then certainly when school starts, we'll work through our school liaison officers to send consistent messaging about why this is an issue. This is something that, frankly, from a policing perspective, and especially in today's climate, I wouldn't have officers assigned to that. We have other priorities that I think we need to get to, but we serve the community. And I can tell you that for every person that's upset about the Noisemaker project, there's about 25 to 30 that are stepping up, calling us, complaining about noisy cars on the streets, how it's interfering with their livelihood and their ability to enjoy their backyard or their streets. And so it's all about balance. And so we're in the middle. We signed up for that, and we will navigate the relational side on both ends. So thank you for your feedback.
Okay, the next speaker on our speakers list is Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through your chair to our guests. Thank you very much for the wonderful work that you're doing in our schools. As a parent and a trustee, I sincerely appreciate that. And I want to thank also Trustee or Vice Chair Cheryl Harrison for her final remarks and, in essence, advocacy for our disenfranchised students. I have two questions. Inspector Biggs alluded to the competencies that are required for school liaisons. And I'm wondering, once those police officers have been identified as suitable for that role, is there any additional training that they receive prior to taking that role on and working with our school communities? And my second question is, it's a bit of a comment too. I can see that the programming and your relationships with the elementary school are probably much easier to establish and maintain than they are for the secondary students. And I'm just wondering if you have any aspirations or goals for what you would like to do within our secondary schools. Is there a source of evidence-based programming or collaboration that you have access to that you can draw upon in order to provide programming or mentorship or resources to students in our secondary schools? Provide those services at that upstream level that you were talking about to alleviate any need for future intervention and enforcement. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to speak on the first question you had about kind of continuing training and education, once we do end up in the role, there is several courses internally that are presented kind of through the Halton Regional Police, and then some through our Ontario Police College, we have courses for youth officers in general, just to deal with and how to speak with youth. We have one that's FAL, Facilitated Adult Learning, on how to present to different groups, kids, adults, anyone that's in a vulnerable section, stuff like that, to give us those skills that we need. There's also education. I know some of the school boards offer education and courses that they have with principals and teachers that we're invited to and we're encouraged to attend, depending on our schedule, that give us an insight to kind of the teacher's way. So it's we're presenting and kind of using the same language that the school is using as well. Anything else, Rob, that you?
No, I think you've covered it off, Adam. I've had the fortunate opportunity of being a former teacher, so for me, even just putting a lesson plan together was pretty seamless, and just my comfort level in talking in front of a group of people, particularly young people, is sort of my background. So just as a personal experience. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as for the second question, I think I can answer that one. So just so you're aware, most of what we do out in the community and within policing now is based on our community safety and wellbeing plan. That was a plan that's been put together very recently. It's actually police services are actually provincially mandated to put plans together that speak to community safety and wellbeing. And within community safety and wellbeing, we have 4 levels of intervention, you can call it. So I guess the best one that police officers are known for would be the immediate response to a situation that's occurring. You can call it emergency response, something that really needs to happen immediately. Secondly, we talk about risk intervention or risk mitigation, and that's where police intervene, or anyone can intervene in the community to prevent an immediate incident from occurring. Next, we have prevention. People see police officers as crime preventers, but we can prevent all or be involved in preventing all different types of social disorder. And finally, we have social development. Now, as a police service, we want to be involved in all 4 of those pillars, if you like, of community safety and well-being. And we are basing our response, our current response, to the high schools, to the elementary schools, and to the community as a whole on that approach. It is evidence-based, and it has been shown to be the best response in terms of being a police service. We like to base ourselves on Sir Robert Peel. We are the public, and the public are the police. And this response has Peelian principles attached to it, as well as the most current evidence-based studies to show that this is the way of modern policing in the 21st century. So we're basing our approach on that, but of course we're not complacent, and we're always looking to change and to morph and to be better, not just within the schools but within the community too. So that's kind of where we are right now, and we're always looking, as I say, to refine our approach or make it better. So I hope that answers the second question.
Thank you very much.
Next up is Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. My question has already been asked.
Okay, there are no speakers on the speakers list. However, I have a question, and that is, well, right now we, all the trustees in front of you could probably attest to the fact that we are getting a lot of emails from our community concerning, what the school board is doing with regards to racism. We've even had, I've had several emails lately that some of our solutions are to defund the police, which of course is not within our purview, and it's way and beyond. But one of the questions, though, since this is top of mind, it does bring, since you are looking for feedback and things like that, have we had, okay, this goes back to probably the question Trustee Shuttleworth had asked about the uniform. Do you always bring a gun onto school property? There's my first question.
So I'll answer that. When our officers are in uniform, they are required to wear all their use of force equipment. You could be traveling to a school for a certain reason, but if you come across an emergency or crisis and you have to intervene, the public expects that of us. I think when you look at the people that we select for these roles, and although they are in uniform and they do have use of force equipment on them, we are humanizing the position. That's why we focus on the positive interactions. And when we're not enforcement based and we're able to interact with all children in the schools, it breaks down some of those barriers about the optics of a uniform. We certainly don't want to be imposing or intimidating, but we do have a role, and that role, we never know. If you knew that you were going to get up that day and go to a certain calls, you might not want to get out of bed. And so we never know how you're going to have to reply or respond to certain things. And even within a school, you could be there and have an active attacker situation, and you are the lifeline for many people in that school. So it's our expectation that officers are always equipped, but professionalism comes in the way that our members conduct themselves and how they interact. And we're hoping to break down any barriers or concerns with our wearing of equipment that may intimidate some.
And I guess this partially comes from the fact that I'm not sure that we have ever had an incident within our schools that requires deadly force. So I think that it could be a further conversation. I was also.
Can I just weigh in? Many years ago, we did have an incident at General Brock High School in which there was a shooting in the school. It was in the early 90s, but it was many, many years ago.
Oh, okay. Back.
Have we lost Chair Gerbents? Oh, there she is. Hello, welcome back.
Had a technical difficulty there, and I'm still can only see myself on the screen. My other question has to do with the mental health response. I was very interested with Constable or Inspector, I forget the title, Biggs, talking about there is a broader team, and I was glad to hear about that because of the many incidents that seem to happen that end up in a not so great ending, starting with a mental health issue. And I was wondering if you could speak to that further.
Yes, thank you for that question. I'd like to explain what resources we have in our Halton community for mental health, because I can only speak to what mental health resources we can provide. So first of all, I'll talk very generally about our crisis outreach and support team. Those those teams are, it's a partnership between a police officer and a social worker from CMHA, and their jobs are to go out to various places and deal with some people who perhaps aren't in mental health crisis, but maybe need to speak to a social worker because they're approaching a mental health crisis. So when we talk about our upstream intervention and our risk mitigation, that's what our COAST team does. Like I said, it's a partnership between the police and a mental health worker from CMHA. And the reason we do that is because obviously police officers are not mental health experts, although we do receive a lot of mental health training. But we are there for two reasons. First of all, under the Mental Health Act, only peace officers are allowed to apprehend people under the Mental Health Act. And secondly, we do provide some protection for the social workers. Our second set of teams that we have, they're called Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Teams. That's a partnership between the police service and also St. Joe's Hospital in Hamilton. And the people that work for us, the mental health professionals that work alongside us at St. Joe's are actually psychiatric nurses. And so those teams actually do go to calls where people are experiencing a mental health crisis. So not only are the mental health nurses highly trained in de-escalation techniques, but also our mobile crisis rapid response officers are also highly trained in de-escalation as well. So that's their job to go there. And again, it's a partnership between police and mental health professionals for the same reasons. First of all, police have the powers to apprehend under the Mental Health Act, and they're also there for protection of the mental health worker. The mental health worker brings along the expertise to help deal with the situation in the very best possible way. What else? There's something else I'd like to point out, and that is that very recently, over the past year and a half or so, all of our frontline officers and our frontline members, so people on the front desk, people that answer 911 calls, anyone that has direct connection with the community are being trained in crisis intervention training. It's an empathy-based training that trains members to de-escalate a certain situation and also to recognize when it is a mental health situation as opposed to something else. Again, doesn't make us experts, but it puts a few more tools in our belt, if you like, when it comes to responding to mental health type calls. We also have a partnership with the Reach Out Centre for Kids. So when an officer goes to an event, perhaps where a youth is experiencing a mental health crisis, that officer, with permission from the youth or permission from the family, is able to directly refer that youth to the Reach Out Centre for Kids for some treatment or for some other community resources. And so those are kinds of ways that we are trying to educate our officers without assuming that they are experts, and also collaborating and partnering with our other community agencies who are experts. So I hope that somewhat answers that question.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, there are no other speakers on the speakers list at this time. So thank you very much for coming to our meeting to explain the many different roles that that the police have within our board, and really appreciate the candid conversation.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
Director Miller, did you have anything that you wanted to add at all?
No, all I would like to say is I want to thank Deputy Chief Wilkie and his staff for coming today. A few weeks ago, Superintendent Padre Barrick and myself and the director and the superintendent from the Catholic Board met with the Chief Tanner, Deputy Chief Wilkie, around this, and we felt it was important that the officers come and explain what the program is in Halton. I was a principal in a school in which there were officers attached at T.A. Blakelock in Georgetown, and I have some good stories around the police interaction with our students and with our staff. And I think it is a different process here and a program here, and I understand that there's a lot of pressure. The climate we're in right now, the pandemic, and in particular, systemic racism and the challenges of racism and our ability to address the issues, legitimate issues and concerns that are being brought to us by racialized and in particular Black and Indigenous communities is something we all have to address. And I think we have to address it together. And I thank the police for coming today, because I think that's the way we address it, is together. And we can make this a better place. We can make Halton a better society and Ontario a better place by just working together and listening and hearing. As Deputy Chief Wilkie said, we need to listen. Officer Biggs also said we need to listen to those who don't feel listened to. And we and police all need to reach out to those that are marginalized to get their perspective and make it a better place. So again, thank you to all of you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our next agenda item. So we are up to our consent agenda item, or actually, yes, which consists of minutes from the last 3 board meetings. So Trustee Amos, would you like to move a motion to consider this?
Yes, please. I'd like to make a motion.
Excellent, thank you. Trustee Collard, would you like to second the motion?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for July 15, 2020. Would anybody like to pull any of the minutes that are listed in the board package? If so, please raise your hand using the red form. Okay, seeing none, I would ask you to go to your blue form to vote. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we have already taken care of the next item. So we will move on to action items for decision for July 22nd. We have one item, the 2020-2021 operating and capital budget, which is report 20071, as I mentioned. Before we get started, I'd like to remind trustees that we do have a budget workshop following this board meeting, and there is a request that you hold your questions until then. This is just to make sure that we get through the rest of the board meeting, as there are some important topics that are coming in the director's report. And the budget workshop that follows this meeting will be live streamed, so it is open to the public. However, it is not recorded, but a synopsis of questions will be available in the minutes of the workshop. So Superintendent Ngoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Grabent, and through the chair to all trustees. We have today a presentation for the draft budget, and also for the benefit of our public, we have in the agenda package the draft budget report, as well as a link to the 2020-2021 operating and capital budget workbook, which has additional details. And I'm going to be sharing my screen here, so do let me know if you do not see the presentation. We're going to be posting the presentation on the screen, on the website as well. Just bear with me for one moment. So I hope you are able to see my screen and the entire slide, so one slide at a time. As I go through the presentation today. I also wanted to acknowledge that on the meeting, we have on the line the General Manager of Financial Services, Jackie Sweetman, Manager of Budget, Jay Chantavong, and the Manager of Capital, Sonia Clayton. I wanted to extend a big thank you to my team for putting together the draft budget in record time, considering the GSNs, or the Grants for Student Needs, have been released towards the end of June. So there has been certainly a lot of work in the background to put this together and present to trustees today. I also wanted to thank the senior team and their staff for being available throughout this process. There have been many meetings and workshops and decisions along the way. And also, I wanted to thank the Board of Trustees for all of your support. We go back to December when we first started the budget process, and all the input and information that has gone into it and all the meetings that we've had together. So thank you all. And with that, I'm going to go through the presentation. There's quite a large number of slides. I don't plan to go through all of them, but I wanted to focus on the net changes in enrollment, revenue, and expenses, as well as go through and spend a bit more time on the budget considerations and priorities, which we will also probably discuss in a bit more detail during the committee of the whole meeting that follows. So with that, in terms of the budget process, very similarly with the prior years, the budget is based on the following objectives. The financial resources are aligned to the multi-year plan. In this case, it is aligned with priorities that are reflected both in the current multi-year plan that is coming to an end, as well as the work that has been done to date to draft the multi-year plan for 2020-2024. And it is aligned in the operational plans and special education plans that follow on an annual basis. We have due diligence and accountability over the financial resources and all the regulatory compliance. So the budget meets all of those requirements and provides flexibility to accommodate for various return to work plans that are evolving. In addition, the budget is allowing to meet the needs of a growing system, focusing on student learning for all, as well as continued support for our special education programs and resources, and focusing on providing a safe, respectful, and welcoming school and workplaces for our students and our staff, as well as you will see a focus on equitable access to resources and technology, and focusing on meeting the guidelines of public health for a safe return to school. The next slide just outlines the many restrictions that we have in terms of how we are able to allocate the funding. I'm not going to go through these in detail, as trustees are well aware, and we have been going through them in the past. And in terms of the budget process, as I mentioned before, it starts in December, usually with participation in provincial consultations. In April, we had further meetings and presented the trustees with the results of the stakeholder consultation, which also incorporated feedback that we've received from the Board of Trustees. We had a presentation to the Special Education Advisory Committee as well. And the Grants for Student Needs, our main source of funding, was released on June 19th. And here we are today with a draft budget before the trustees that we propose for a final approval by the Board of Trustees on July 22nd. And with that, we propose to submit it by the end of July, so well in advance of the new timeline of August 19th. In a typical year, the budget must be approved by the Board of Trustees and submitted to the Ministry by the end of June. This time, as we were delayed in the release of the Grants for Student Needs and the information that we needed for planning purposes, the timeline has been delayed to August 19th. A second set of the budget reporting cycle is the revised estimates, which is due to the Ministry mid-December, and that will provide us a bit more information on the actual enrollment for one of the count dates, October 31st. So that is a better reflection as to where we expect to end the year. And finally, by mid-November of the following year, after the end of the fiscal year, we will have audited financial statements approved by the Board of Trustees and submitted to the Ministry by November 15th, 2021. And it is based on actual enrollment for both count dates of October 31st and March 31st. The key elements of the budget are enrollment, revenue, and expenses. And the next few slides, we'll go through these one at a time. Enrollment is taken on the 2 count dates, as I mentioned before, October 31st and March 31st. And they are averaged out to give us the average daily enrollment that is the main driver of our funding. If we compare the budget for the projection for the coming year to the original budget, which is the bottom half of the table on the screen, we can see that we're expecting growth of over 600 students in both panels, elementary and secondary, for a grand total of a growth of 1,274 students, or 2%. A better date or data is if we look at the top of the table, comparing it to revised estimates, which already includes the October 31st actual enrollment and gives us a much better projection for enrollment for the year. And you will notice that we are still 1,043 students more, expecting to have more students next year as compared to the current year. Most of that growth being at the secondary level with over 700 students. Slide 13 just shows the steady projection of a growth in enrollment over a 10-year period by panel and then combined as well. So let's take a look at our revenue. So total revenues are 807 million for next year. And net of accumulated surplus of 4 million is 803 million. Most of our revenue comes from provincial grants, which are the grants for student needs, or the GSN. That's 91.2%, plus some additional provincial grants, which includes the priorities and partnership funds that are released to date, as well as any other provincial ministries. For example, if we have ESL provided by the Ministry of Community, Child, Community and Social Services, that would be reflected in that 0.2%. In addition, school-generated funds make up 1.5% of our total revenue. It is a little lower than what we had in the prior years because it does include a projected decrease as a result of the environment we're currently in. Investment income has also been reduced slightly, makes up 0.1% of our income or total revenue, and other revenues mainly reflect the federal grants as well as the education development charges. And finally, amortization of deferred capital contributions is a source of funding that comes in to cover our amortization expense for our assets, which is a non-cash cost. So that just offsets that portion of our expenses that is not a cash-bearing expense. So I'm going to go through this slide. So main changes to the grants for student needs. So this is our 91.2% of the total revenues. So what are the main changes from year to year? Well, the provincial average has increased by 2% to 12,525. As you'll see on one of the slides that follows, we are still below the provincial average. However, our funding did increase on average by a bit more than just the provincial average year over year. The funding also increase is meant to cover for 1% increase in salary and benefits, which were centrally negotiated, as well as provides a cost increase of 2% to cover for inflation on the non-salary component within the grants. Class size ratio that was agreed upon centrally to be 23:1 is now reflected through the allocation. In our case, you will see how this has led to increase in funding, as in the current year, we were staffing at 24.85:1. Student transportation levels have been maintained to the current level. In the past, there was a cost adjustment of 2% and even 4% last year. That, however, was not reflected in the grants for next year. The supports for student funds have been added to the grants for student needs under the supplemental grants, and they represent the additional funding that was centrally negotiated in the collective agreements for various employee groups. We were also pleased to see that a number of priorities and partnership funds have been transferred to the GSN. This means there is now a long-term commitment to these areas. The Priorities and Partnership Fund are those other provincial grants that are provided to boards on a pilot basis to see how things work, if they have the expected outcome. And if that's the case, then a long-term commitment is made by moving them to GSN. So we are excited to see that the mental health workers, experiential learning, curriculum assessment, and so forth have been added now to the grants for student needs on a long-term basis. Provincially, there has also been mention of additional funding to help with COVID expenses. They have not been broken down by board, and we did not project what our share would be because we don't know what the basis for dividing this funding is. And what we do know is there's 12 million that was announced for additional mental health support and 15 million for technology-related support. There has also been an indication that there may be additional funding for cleaning, but there was never anything in writing that identified an amount. Also, given consideration to next year and the fact that schools were closed in the current year, the high credit day school allocation will continue to be funded at the adult day school rate, recognizing that some of the students may be coming back for more credits. And other than that, the only other main change is that school condition improvement and school renewal funding are now based on the new assessment of the facility condition index as of the 2018 assessment, which for us meant additional funding. So we're certainly pleased to see that. So just in general terms, if we're looking at the additional funding, so the grants for student needs for our board increased 39 million since the budget in the prior year. So most of that is an increase as a result of the lower class size at secondary panel, as well as making room for the increase in the salary and benchmark for the various employee groups. The additional provincial grants have also increased. That is mainly as a result of the fact that more of the priorities and partnership funds have been identified at this stage in the process. Usually they are added through the year and we only budget for what is released. So they released more of the funding that was made available through Priorities and Partnership Fund. In particular, MAP strategy, for example, and the human rights and equity grants were announced later in the year in 1920, and now they're announced upfront. Provincial grants also include an increase for the additional ESL for non-credit adult learning going into next year. Federal grants have gone up, the majority of that being an increase in grants from Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC. So that's the federal grant for language instruction and the Welcome Center. Both programs have gone up. School-generated funds has gone down. We had estimated about 19 million. We were on track to be around 21 million in school-generated funds. And through the year, given the current pandemic, we have issued refunds to parents and families for various trips and food programs. We are making an assumption that those will be restricted next year as well. So we've used that as a base to estimate what the school-generated funds revenue will be for next year. It is a budget neutral number because we're simply at this point in the budget matching the revenue with the expenses. If it changes in revise, we'll have a clearer picture. We'll reflect it at both ends. So it doesn't really impact our bottom line. Investment income, well, that's interest that we get on our cash balance. And it certainly is expected to be reduced year over year as the interest rates have been decreasing in the past 6 months. I do have another slide that I'm going to go through for the other fees and revenue, which break that down. So I'm just going to move ahead. This slide just provides you with a division of the various allocations within the grants for student needs. So I'm not going to go into detail. The next slide provides the numbers that go with that. So these are the various allocations within the grants for student needs. You will notice that the main increase is in the Pupil Foundation grant, which covers for all of our student-facing staff, so teachers, educational assistants, early childhood educators, etc., and any instructional material. Language grant and special education grant have also increased, and these are based on various statistical models as well as enrollment growth. You will also note there is a big decrease here for qualification and experience, and this grant in particular complements the Pupil Foundation grant. It's the differential between the salary benchmark in the Pupil Foundation grant and where on the experience grid our teachers actually are placed. But in the prior year, this is where we had a big decrease. So there was about 14 million under the budget, the 1920 budget, for attrition protection at the secondary level for all the secondary teachers that we were not, or retirements that we were not able to replace because we were building up to that 28-to-1 class size. So really, if we take out of the equation that 14 million that moved up in the Pupil Foundation, the qualification and experience grant is actually 7 million to the positive that shows the growth and the move of our staff on the experience level. So it's just a net between Pupil Foundation and the qualification and experience grant. You will see that school operations, which is our maintenance and operations of schools, has also gone up, which is a factor of growth as well as the change in the secondary class size. The support for student funds, which were in the collective agreements, has been added to the GSN. So it's almost $6 million for additional positions, which we'll detail later in the presentation. The projection for the per pupil funding, you will see that the average provincial per pupil funding is $12,525. For our board is $11,281. It has the difference between that and the provincial average has gone down, and that's mainly a reflection of not just growth, but that change in the class size, which for us resulted in additional funding. So if we're looking at those other fees and revenues that I mentioned in the revenue slide above, it is made up of tuition fees. So for international students, you will see there's an increase of 731,000, and that is mainly as a result of increase in the fee itself and not an increase in enrollment. We do have a number of students that are not here and potentially may be restricted to travel. At this point, we kept the enrollment to be based on what the registrations are for next year. And we will be able to adjust both that and the staffing levels accordingly for revised estimates once we have a better idea of what that looks like in the fall. Rental revenue includes childcare, before and after care, and the rental and community use of our facilities. So there's a little bit of growth in that respect as well. And you'll also see that secondments, those were usually they're budget neutral because they do have a source of funding and an expense. They were usually captured and revised. So we are showing them here now, just as we have the information. So you'll see that's a difference from the prior budget, but it's just a matter of timing and when they were actually captured. And education development charges, this is outside of the operation and it doesn't impact our in-year position, financial position. But we are expecting with the, in terms of what we've seen, that we are able to collect, that it will go slightly down next year. And it's based on the pace of developments and how many come online. International student fees, as I mentioned, have gone up from the prior year, and that was as a result of trying to match with the reduction in grant that was introduced last year, whereby in the GSN, there was a reduction of 1,300 per pupil. And therefore, so in this current case, we are losing about 700,000, but we are making it up next year through the increase in funds, in fees. So let's take a look at expenses. We spend most of our expenses on instruction and indirectly on students. So instruction is directly on the student and in the classroom. Indirectly, we spend 14% of pupil accommodation. I know the terminology is based on ministry category and the way we have to report, but really pupil accommodation looks at school operations, maintenance, groundskeeping, caretaking, repairs, as well as temporary accommodations or portables. And we are looking at student transportation as well, getting our students to school. It's about 2.4%. So all that is that indirect cost to instruction, and under other, the 2.3%, we have school-generated funds that make most of that number as well. So when we put all of that aside, we are spending on administration 2.2% of our budget, and the rest on instruction, directly or indirectly. I'm not going to go through in detail over the next few slides. They're there for your review, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. They break down what each one of those ministry categories include, so you can take a look at those details. And I'm going to go through to the main changes in our expenses. So you'll see the main increase is in instruction. Out of 47 million overall, 42 almost is directly on instruction. There's an increase in administration, and the reason for the increase in administration is enrollment based. So that allocation does grow up with enrollment. Transportation has gone up as well as a result. I should take that back. Sorry, going back to administration. So if we're looking at the expenses, the funding side does go up through enrollment, but in here in the expenses, we're also capturing 425,000 of the support for students funding that was allocated to non-union staff in the grants for student needs. So that makes the bulk of this increase in expenses, and the rest relates to an increase in legal fees. It's a net of increase in legal fees and a decrease in payroll system fees. Transportation increase of 900. That in particular reflects increase due to growth. Mostly additional special education programs, so about 600,000, over 600,000 of that is for special education programming, transportation. Over 200,000 is for growth. And then in pupil accommodation, that increase does include the additional caretaker staff that have been funded through growth, but as well as the support for student funding, as well as increase in amortization expense as we build additional schools or build additions. We amortize over the life expectancy of that asset. The amortization expense every year does go up, But as you'll recall, there is the deferred capital contribution on the revenue side that offsets that increase. So there's a few other slides that detail a little bit more what the increase is. So if we're looking at instruction, main increase out of the 41.7 million is additional classroom teachers and supply staff to cover for leaves, as well as educational assistants. And those have been covered through an increase in revenue through growth in the GSM, but also the support for student funding. So that's $6 million that was provided for all the employee groups. Most of that is in this instruction category. You will also notice the textbook and supplies has gone up over $4 million. That in particular has a $4 million contingency for COVID expenses. So that's where that is reflected, that we had put aside. When we look at the changes in administration and governance, you'll see